Welcome back to our podcast on crisis intervention and chaplaincy. I'm Brian Ginther. This is my lovely wife, Jeannie Ginther. Together, we've been chaplains for over 10 years and crisis interventionists for over 10 years as well. In fact, we're the team coordinators for our I.F.O.C CISM team, which is a team that can deploy nationally from our different chaplain corps. And I'm an ICISF approved instructor. So today, we're going to continue our conversation about chaplaincy and crisis intervention. If you haven't seen the first episode, please go back and watch that. The link will be in the description, where we talked about chaplaincy being a ministry of helps, of servanthood outside of the church itself with people that usually don't share our faith. It's not proselytizing in nature. It's really servant-based ministry just to help people get through the worst day of their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. We've all had bad days, and chaplains are important for that. So today we're actually going to focus on talking about crisis intervention. Last episode, like you said, we talked about chaplaincy. What is chaplaincy and how does it work? And what are some things that chaplains do in the field or in different settings. So today we're going to be talking about crisis intervention. What is crisis intervention? And what do we mean when we're talking about here with us? When we are talking about crisis intervention, what are we referring to? And so, Brian, I know you said that you're also an instructor for ICISF, and you've really done a lot of training. So I feel like that this is something that you find very, very valuable to be able to pair with chaplaincy. And we're going to talk about that more in the next episode. But today, I would like for you just to share with us, what is crisis intervention and what is it not?
Absolutely. I've traveled internationally and taught other militaries and other countries about crisis intervention and how to do it well. And so crisis intervention is a short-term, psychological-based helping system after someone has a critical incident. So you can't talk about crisis intervention without talking about the crisis, right?
Right.
So we call these critical incidents, or things that happen unexpectedly, usually that you would feel that your life was threatened, where you can just get stuck afterwards. This is something that can develop. If you're stuck for a period of time, you can develop into PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, or post-traumatic stress injury, depending on which literature you're following at the time that you're watching this.
Absolutely.
But crisis intervention is not psychotherapy. It's not a trained, licensed, credentialed counselor working with you for a long period of time to help work through deep-rooted issues, right? It's a set of science-based, psychologically based tools and techniques, a way to talk through, to storytell through whatever happened in a way that helps your brain process it. And then we give them coping skills and things to do. Imagine that, I've heard this explained to me this way before. Imagine there's a video recorder inside your brain that's looking through your eyes of your day. And throughout the day, it records everything that happens. And then at the end of the day, when you go to sleep, during that portion of your sleep that's the REM sleep, that's when your brain kind of takes that file and cuts it up into little segments and puts it away in a filing cabinet all neat and tidy. And then you start the next day. But the problem is, what if something really bad happens that day? If I were to pick up something from this table and kind of toss it at you from across the room, if you're not expecting it, you might block and stop it from striking your face. Well, your brain kind of does the same thing. It has a shock response, and that can result in some holes in the film, right? Sometimes when you couldn't see what was happening because you're blocking your eyes. And so crisis intervention starts with a very structured conversation, either individually or as a group, to help fill in some of those gaps. And then we talk about common symptoms of stress. This is what you might experience, and this is abnormal, but it's normal considering what you've been through. And so we give them, do these things, don't do these things, advice to help them get through and sleep well and really protect their sleep so their brain can do its job at night when they're sleepy. So crisis intervention is a structured set of conversations and tools with models that were developed by industry leaders, Dr. George Everly, Mitchell, and that's what it is. It's not psychotherapy. It's not a higher level of care, just like we talked about last episode about chaplaincy being kind of spiritual paramedics that help stop the bleeding and then get them to a higher level of care. Crisis intervention is kind of the same thing. It's short-term help right after a really bad event and then we can hand them off to higher levels of care if need be. And
good.
studies have shown that many people don't need a handoff. Simple conversations and coping techniques right off the bat actually mitigate and help them enough that they don't need to be transferred to a higher level of care. But a handoff and a referral to higher levels of care, psychotherapists, religious leaders, pastors, psychologists, psychiatrists, that is all part of the model as well for people who need it and need additional help.
Absolutely.
So that's what that's what crisis intervention is, and we talk about it. And very specifically, we're talking about crisis intervention as taught by ICISF, the International Critical Incident Stress Foundation.
Yes.
They're the ones who wrote it. They're the ones who pioneered it, developed it, and they are the world's leading experts on it. There are other people who have taken it and kind of reformed it and remodeled it and added things to it. We're not talking about those different adaptations. We're talking about crisis intervention as written and published by the authors of the subject.
Right. Absolutely, because it seems like some of the trainings that have taken parts of this training, the ICISF training, and they've taken parts out, to me, that's concerning because, I mean, they maybe they don't feel that it's all valid, but it was so scientifically proven of how it works and how it helps to be able to mitigate the PTSD, right?
Yeah.
Then to me, it just seems like if you take some of it out, you're just asking for trouble, honestly.
You are, and some people have legitimately changed the name of it. So the military asked permission from George Everly Jr. to come in and take his class and retool it because the government has to do it their way, and they have to call it, something they created. And so some people have had permission to do that, but there's also been some challenges along the way to crisis intervention, and in particular the Cochrane reviews, which post 9/11 went in and tried to validate whether crisis intervention was actually helpful or not. And the Cochrane review said that it wasn't, said that it was harmful, that people got worse. But they also were doing those techniques incorrectly. They were doing group techniques on individuals. They were doing it on the streets of New York when you could see the rubble. The dust was still in the air from the towers falling. Wow. And many reviews since then, many peer-reviewed scientific reviews, and where they take many different reviews and they gather them together and create major findings. Those type of researchers have gone through and found that the Cochrane reviews were actually violating their own ethics in the way that they stated they were doing their reviews. And they challenged that their findings were not accurate because they didn't even do the techniques the right way.
Right.
And since then, there have been so many peer-reviewed, research-based studies showing that crisis intervention is actually helpful, that people do actually get better. Now, they did find that some people do actually get worse. But what's surprising, or not really surprising for those of us that have been doing it, is that the rate of people that got worse is the same rate of people that get worse with therapy. It is possible to go to a psychologist and get worse. So crisis intervention has a positive review and a positive finding in all these reports saying people got better, some stayed the same, and a small amount got worse. Actually almost better marks than psychotherapy reviews and research have found. So crisis intervention is valuable, and specific to our conversation today, crisis intervention also acknowledges that there's spiritual providers out there like chaplains that do this work. In fact, they have classes called Pastoral Crisis Intervention that shows you in the CISM models where a faith-based provider with a faith-based believer needing help can interject the things that are specific to their faith. So in Christian faith, the different religious and spiritual interventions that we do in prayer fit in there. In other types of faith, those fit in there as well. So even from the ICISF crisis intervention side, faith-based believers and spiritual care providers like chaplains have a role and can interject their own skills uniquely within the model.
And we're definitely going to talk about that in the next episode. I really want to spend some time pairing the two, but crisis intervention, it does work. I mean, we've personally seen it work. Like I said in the last episode, I went through chaplain training first and learned about crisis intervention through my chaplain training through International Fellowship of Chaplains. And then as I learned, I wanted to take it back to my first responder peers. And so not only did we do that, but we ended up developing a team that didn't just work with EMS and fire, but they also worked with police. And I have personally seen, and I mean, we could just spend hours of testimony talking about the things that we've seen and the people that we've seen that have been helped with this. And even people that had been, I know several times, one of the most heartbreaking things for me was working with these paramedics, firefighters, and police officers and hearing time and time again, where was this 30 years ago when I needed it?
Almost every time.
Yeah, and they said I could have done so much better. I might not have lost my marriage. I might not have lost my children. I might not have lost, my passion for my job, And they didn't all say that exactly, but it was always similar. And that was the most heartbreaking for me, was where was this team when I needed it 30 years ago? And I said, well, we're here now. But we have so many stories that we could just share of successes and of people that have been totally transformed just by giving the permission and the tools to be able to process the events that they're going through as first responders, and to be able to learn how to then take it to their own first responder peers and to be able to develop systems. So it is such a powerful tool. And but next episode, we're going to talk about how we're going to pair crisis intervention with chaplaincy, and how important it is to merge the two, to have a crisis interventionist that actually has a chaplain on the team or is a chaplain, and then vice versa. It's so, so very important. And we've seen over the past decade how they both work together, and how sometimes one stands out more than the other, but it's always so, and you never know when that's going to be. You never know when you're going to show up to an event and you needed your chaplain.
Yeah.
Or you show up to an event as a chaplain and you needed your crisis interventionist, right?
Yep.
You never know. So it's so important to merge those two on a team.
Absolutely.
So we're going to talk about that next episode. Did you have anything else you wanted to share with us on crisis intervention before we merge the two?
No, we'll see you next episode.
All right, we'll see you next time. Make sure you join us. And if you missed the first episode on what is a chaplain, the link is going to be in the description. Please check that out, and we will see you next week.